we wanted to honor our guest. And you're also tasting the second wine. That's not the 100 points from Robert Parker, I'm sorry. For next time, okay. And I'm sure Veronique will comment a little bit on this wine, which is their second one and from 2008. But anyway, we're delighted to hear from Veronique Sanders how she got what's the equivalent of a gold medal, really, even more in a way, when you're doing wine. Veronique is an incredibly talented and really worldwide recognized for her achievements, and she's equally modest. So it's a real privilege to have her here. Her husband, as some of you may know, is also a big name in wine because Alexander Van Beek is heading Château Giscourt and Château du Tertre. So some people call them the power couple in Bordeaux. And there is one question that she dread when she is with Alexander, but we're sad, but for that it's good that he's not here, is if you ask them or her which wine is the best. So at least today she won't have this problem. Without further ado, please welcome Veronique Sanders. J'arrête les images, ouais.
D'accord. On peut le fermer même.
Juste fermer.
So, good afternoon. Thank you very much for welcoming me and Chateau Bailly at the FCC. It's very impressive, of course. This is a reference club that I always heard about when I was coming to Hong Kong, and I'm very glad to be with you today. Thank you, Florence, and thank you, Nanhe. I'm not sure. The problem I have today is that I don't know how much you know about wine, how much you know about Parker. So let me just say a few general things, and we'll go deeper and deeper. And of course, with your question, it will be much more interesting. But first of all, what is a Parker score? How was it born? You probably know that in the wine business, which exists since many, many centuries, the wines of Bordeaux have been shipped around the world from the Middle Age. We never had scores. In the past, it was British critics who used to write about the wine, describing the wines, and never ever gave points. It's relatively new. It all started when this famous American journalist called Robert Parker started to taste wine at the end of the 70s and became famous with the 82 vintage because he was the only one saying 82 is a great wine, is a great vintage. And that's the way he started it all. And this guy, to make it simple, he just invented this scoring system among 100 points. So it seems obvious today, but it wasn't at that time. And in a way, he made something fantastic for the wine industry. And I think we should build for him a golden statue in Bordeaux, because doing that, he just make the wine clearer for everyone. If you didn't know much about wine, you would come in a shop and you would see a 90 points or 92 or 93, and you would feel comfortable buying it, even if you had not great culture about wine. So he kind of made the wine popular around the world and made the wines easy to understand with this scoring system. Of course, there is a perverse effect, is that it gives speculation. The more points you have, the more expensive can get your wine, not because of the chateau, but also because of all the chain taking advantage of it, and the price could go up and up. And I often heard Parker saying, I regret the power I have, because Parker is a wine lover, he's a great taster, and he is like you and me, he loves to drink wine and not to pay too much. But of course, when he was liking too much wine, the price would go up, and that was the way it was. So that's the first thing. So I'm going to tell you about the case of Aubailly. You have many ways of getting 100 points, and I'm not going in that direction. I just tell you about what we did at Aubailly and our little history as a good example of what happened. First of all, you have to know in the wine business, everything is about time. You have to know where you come from. And the first thing I did when I arrived at Aubailly, which was owned by my family during, I'm the fourth generation of the previous family owning Aubailly. It's now owned by an American whose name is Bob Wilmers. He bought Aubailly to my grandfather, in 1998, and I'm running it for him. The first thing I did is I checked the history. And we hired somebody who's been working with us for 3 years, and we found out all the history of Aubailly. And then we realized how impressive was the character who ran Aubailly over the centuries, and how impressive is the terroir. And Aubailly has a magical terroir. It's located on a hillock. It's at the highest point of our appellation, which is Pessac-Léognan in the Grave area. And we have 33 hectares of a single block vineyard, which never changed size in 4 centuries. So this is quite unique. And we know that vines were existing before. We have written proofs of the existence of the vines in 13-something. But it's really a Parisian banker, Firmin Le Bailly, who fell in love with the vines, gave his name to the vineyard in 1630, and since 1630, the property never changed size. This is very rare and unique in Bordeaux, because most of the properties increased or diminished, and to have kept the original terroir is quite unique. And then we had a golden age that I discovered under the time of Belot des Minières, Alcide Belot des Minières, who was an engineer, a guy who made his fortune in America, actually in Virginia, and came back from America, bought Aubailly in 1872, and managed to push the wine of Aubailly as high as the first growth. So during 70 years, between 1872 and 1940, Aubailly used to sell at the same price as Lafite, Latour, Margaux, Aubryon. So it was quite impressive. And this guy really pointed out the amazing effect of the terroir, and that was the high time for Aubailly. It was known, if you see all labels of Aubailly, as a premier cru exceptionnel. So the label was very simple: Château Aubailly, premier cru exceptionnel. That was it. Then we had the economic crisis of the 30s. The property fell down, as all of Bordeaux. The Second World War was even more difficult. And my great-grandfather, Daniel, bought the estate in 1955. And as everybody got hit by the frost in 1956, and he lost... Sorry. He lost almost everything, as everyone, but we kept the original vineyard, we kept the original vines, which were planted by Belot des Minières, and this is really part of the DNA of Aubailly. We have vines in front of the chateau which are 120 years old, and you know that in Bordeaux we make blend wines, and today when we plant the Cabernet, we plant the Merlot next, and the Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot. But in the past, the blend was done in the vineyard. And we still have this in front of the chateau with 4 hectares, mixing 6 grape varieties. So this is really something which is quite unique and impressive. And it's also something where I focus in all the improvements we did to move into quality, because this is really the heart of the blend of Aubailly every single year. So what we did when we sold the property in 98, my grandfather stayed on board for 2 years, and I was still learning with him. And we got quite a shock with the 99 vintage. We were not owning Aubailly anymore, but we were responsible for it. And we had a terrible score from Parker with the 99 vintage. Parker gave us 79 points. And that was an earthquake for us. That was a big drama, because imagine it never happened under my time, under my family, and we got that for a new American owner. It was a problem. So we started to think we of course we thought it should never happen again. All the critics love Aubailly usually, and that was a big problem. So we started to think, and we thought, something must go wrong, and we already started to invest. So we made huge investments, thanks to Bob Wilmers, in the vineyard, in the cellar, at every step. And you know that in a property, you should always inject money every 10, 20 years. It's something which is fantastic. You always hear that Bordeaux is expensive or whatever, but in fact, we never spend our money in a new Jaguar or new Rolls-Royce or whatever, but we spend our money in a new tractor, in a new cellar, in a new machines and if Bordeaux is known to be expensive, which is actually not true at all, and I will maybe tell about that later, the thing is that we are always trying to be at the top of the science, of the technology, and we always try to be where we should be as classified growth. Our duty is to be as clean as possible in our wine for the consumer, but also for the people working on the estate, for everyone. So it's something we always did, is to be at the head of research, and that's why we work very closely with the University of Enology. So since 1999, we invested significantly in order to improve all the work in the vineyard and in the cellars. The concept is just to respect the terroir. And when you have a terroir, when you're lucky to have a terroir, you should definitely keep its spirit, keep its soul. And you don't want to change it all in 1 year just to get the super score. You just want to work for medium, long term, because everything we do is for the long term. If we follow the fashion, we are wrong, because the fashion just lasts a few months, a few years. And the wines we do now, which will be drunk in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, sometimes 50 years, the fashion would have changed. So it's very important to keep your style, keep your personality, and respect your terroir. And our style, and you see it a little bit in the wine you have today, the style of the wine is always to have power, but also softness, and never, ever anything aggressive. So the silkiness of the tannins you have at Aubailly is really the hallmark of Aubailly. La Part 2008 is a wine I love because it has this elegance, this gentleness, this softness, which makes it very pleasant to drink with many things. And thank you for making such a good meal today. So, what you call 100 points, well, in the wine business, 100 points is called a perfect wine. When you are known as a perfect wine, or at least you have made a perfect vintage, it's also because you had a vision. You had a dream, and I had a dream. So you probably saw on the picture this map where Aubailly was at the beginning of the 20th century among the top 8 of Bordeaux. My dream was to put back the quality of the wine at this level. Probably not at the same price as the first course anymore because they moved into another galaxy, but at least to get back to these incredible wines which were famous already at that time. And my vision, my wish, was to put all the team together with the same ambition and to use all kinds of things of creativity to improve every tiny details. And when you do wine, you can make wine, everybody can make wine, but to make a great wine is something different because it's just a question of details. And it's a little bit like driving a fast car. You can very, very easily get out of the road. And those vineyards are incredible machines to run, and I'm so privileged to be able to run one, because if you touch something, you see immediately the effect. So you see, for example, when I arrived, we increased the leaf age of 15 centimeters in order to gain a little bit in density. But now with the global warming, I'm bringing it down a little bit because we have to adapt to the climatic condition, and as we do adapt to the climatic condition of every single vintage. So you need ideas, you need charisma to get all the team behind you, and for that we had a fantastic thing is that when Bob Wilmers arrived, we always have at least 1 or 2 meals a year with the whole team. And I remember in 2000, I think we had a lunch, and one of the guys in the vineyard said, ask Bob at the end of the lunch, so Mr. Wilmers, when will you take all of us, when will you take us to New York? And Bob thought 3 seconds, and he said, well, when you'll have 100 points. And when with the 2009 vintage, when we got the 100 points, I called Bob and I said, well, I have good news and bad news. We have 100 points. And you remember, the whole team is expecting to go to New York. And what is fantastic with Bob is that, of course, he kept his word and he took the whole team to New York. So in last December, you probably saw the picture. Most of the team, including the gardener, the housekeeper, we all went to New York. And that was an incredible trip. I couldn't believe myself to see those happy faces who were blessing Mr. Wilmers for this present, this amazing present. Most of them have never been to Paris, so imagine. So that's why you need ideas, you need charisma, you need a team working hard every single day of the world outside in the vineyard. It's a very hard job. And you need good technology. And that's something Parker pointed out. He said, since 20 years, Bordeaux never made that beautiful wines. Why? Because, of course, with the global warming, we've been blessed having better climatic conditions, and we were able to make wines like they did in 47, 61, or whatever. But we also improved so much the technology that today we are also able to produce consistent wine every single vintage. And if I'm looking in the last known as a challenging vintage, we never talk about small vintage in Bordeaux. We talk about vintage of the centuries or challenging vintage. So like 2013, for example, we tasted 2013 at Vinexpo yesterday, and I was impressed by the quality of 13, you know. So it's something, if you buy a classified growth and a wine like Aubailly, you deserve to have certain level of quality, and that's my wish, is that we keep this consistency. And that is actually where Aubailly is very good at. It's not in the great vintage. Of course, we are able to make great wine in the great vintage, but Aubailly has always been known to be able to make great wines in small vintages, like 84, 87, 92. Those kinds of vintage, we are really among the crowd. So, saying that, what drives us is also the harmony of the team and the happiness we carry. And I do believe that in a glass of wine, you can see a smile. If you feel, when you arrive in an estate, you feel immediately if there are tension in the place, or in the opposite, if you have harmony. And I invite you all to come and visit us. And it's something which strikes me. When I arrive in the morning, I have this well-being feeling, and it's something we really work on the beauty of the place, on the location. And I do believe that if you have this harmony, you have this happiness. And it's exactly what happened with the 15 vintage. We were smiling in the spring, smiling in the summer, smiling during the harvest, and then smiling when people came to taste the baby Primer wine, because the wine just showed beautifully well. So we have certain vintages, like the 2009, which gave us pure happiness. So for me, wine is bottled sunshine. You understand that. But when you have done all that, when you know where you come from, when you love what you do today, you have to build the future. And when we got 100 points, it's also it gives you pressure, actually, because we always need to be on the move. We always need to think ahead and to think what's next, because we should not sit there and say, okay, I'm there. That's every year, every vintage, we start from scratch again. We start a new story. In Bordeaux, you know, as in France, we are not allowed to do anything. We are not allowed to irrigate. We are not allowed to cover or protect the vines. We are not allowed to add aromas. So the rules of the game in France are a bit different as in other parts of the world. And we need to be always thinking, okay, what's next? How will we improve? And the cascading effect you have on the brand when you get 100 points is that you become a reference, and you have to stay a reference. There's an English magazine who published, after we got the 100 points a year after, our performance, and we became best performer of the year, and commercially speaking. But for me, to be a performer means also to be better than yesterday. So when we got the 100 points, I remember I talked with my right hand, Gabriel Vialard, the technical director, who is an amazing guy, and Gabriel looked at me and said, "Ooh, we'll have to work even harder." And that's exactly what we do today. And we just got some fabulous results on the 2015 Obai, which apparently tasted super well during the primeur. We are just in the middle of the primeur campaign. And we never forgot that, is that our 100 points give us a duty, is to go further and continue and do even better. And just for your pleasure. So I hope I'll be able to welcome you at Obai very soon, that you can see on spot what I'm talking about. I could tell you during hours what we improved technologically speaking, but I'm not sure it's what you expect. But I'll be happy to answer the questions. Florence, tell me if I'm on time, I don't know. So if you have any question, I think it will be much more interesting to answer the question.
I'm just wondering with Robert Parker, I think he is retired, is that right? Or if he's not retired, sorry, my question is, who in his place, who are the critics who you would like to please and who perhaps we should be looking out for in the same way we look out for Robert Parker?
So I think, as I said, Parker invented this score system, and in that he's been unique. Today, almost everybody is using the same scoring system. And it's very difficult to know if somebody will replace him. Of course, he announced that Neil Martin, who's been working with him and for him since many, many years, is now going to run Bordeaux. Neil was doing the primeur scoring since many years already with Parker himself. Last year, Parker didn't come for the primeur, but tasted in bottle. And from this year, Parker announced that Neil will do the primeur and the bottle scoring. Parker didn't retire because he's still writing for California, as you know, and he still loves wine and doing lots of tasting with the wine advocate new owners around the world, and he's coming, I think, in Hong Kong in November. So Parker didn't retire. But Neil Martin took over for Bordeaux for the scores. And the second part of your question is who next? Is it Neil Martin? Is it somebody else? That's a good question, and I don't have the answer. But what I'm sure about is that we have a large number of critics around the world. You have some in Asia. We know the ones in England. Neil is actually English and living in England. You have the ones in America. You have people writing about wines around the world. And what I believe in is the consistency of the notes, of the scores you get. And I can show you later on, if you want, the results of the 15. What pleased me is that all around the world we've been scored at the top level. So does that mean we won't have just one judge who will give you the 100 points or less or nothing? But you need to have this consistency. So the consistency I'm trying to have at Obai, vintage after vintage, is the same consistency we should get with all critics, in my opinion. If your wine is good, it should make unanimity, you know? I didn't mention that, but we are the only one industry where you got this incredible system of scores. Imagine that music or fashion would be scored. Imagine that you would give, 98 points to Don Giovanni, 95 to a Symphony of Mahler. It's also a question of taste. But at a certain level, you have a question of quality, which is recognized. And if all the critics of the world recognize your work, I think it's another valuable judgment.
The gentleman there, thank you.
Could you kindly sort of take us through the component structure of the Robert Parker point system, which presumably he developed and which the whole world now follows? Other critics follow his system, or do they develop their own systems? And thirdly, is there any way in which that system can be improved as far as Bordeaux growers are concerned?
To improve the scoring system of Parker?
Yeah, well, firstly, what is the system? What are the components of the system? Color, clarity, long finish, all these sort of important points. That's the first point. The second point is, do all the other critics adopt exactly the same system, or do they vary it a bit? And thirdly, is there any improvement which now Parker has sort of stepped back can be imposed on the system which improves it?
Well, that's excellent questions. I don't have the answers for all of that, but I do believe if somebody wants to have the same power as Parker, needs to create something new, for sure. Because Parker, what he did, can't be copied, can't be just followed, you know. And I don't know where we should go, apart from maybe this average world critic score. I'm not sure. And regarding the, yeah, sorry. I think Parker, that's a question more that you should ask Parker, because I'm not in his mind, but I know he had a very clear system. When he's tasting a wine, he gives us few points for the color, few points for the density, few points for the aromas, etc. So, but after 30 years of doing that, I imagine he's doing it very, you know, without even thinking. I don't know exactly, but it is true that he has a system, definitely, and he can explain that very well. When he came to Hong Kong in 2012, I think, for the Wine Future, we were one of the 20 wines which were supposed to have great future, and he picked it up, and he explained that in front of everyone. But I don't know exactly how he built his numbers. I have no clue. What I know is that under 78, 75, you never see a wine. I mean, it's really from 75 to 100, the scoring system.
If I can just add a little anecdote that I've heard either from you or one of your colleagues, saying that people like Veronique are never sure of. You know that story, right? Do you want to tell it?
Well, somebody in the Medoc who used to receive Parker every year told me, I never know when I got the Parker points. Is it when he arrives on the parking? Is it when he's tasting the wine? Or is it when I'm shaking his hand at the last minute? I don't think that's so true, but Parker is a human. And he says this. When he got wrong with Obey 99, a year later, he wrote it down. He said, I was wrong with this wine. And that is what is fantastic with Parker, is because he's very humble, very modest, and he's just a man who can make mistakes. And the crazy thing with on the business side is that everybody thinks that when you got some scores, it's the only truth, you know, and it is not actually. You have your own taste, you have your own palate, and you should see if your own palate match Parker's palate or match another critic palate. So I always say, make your own mind, taste your wine, and make your own mind. Ask your merchant, follow a wine critic, but be yourself. And life is too short to drink bad wine or wines you don't like. So
I'm happy to say that I have visited Chateau Giscou, and sorry to say that I have not visited Aubaï. But you mentioned your parcel, your vineyard, has not changed in hundreds of years. 30 hectares, 4 of which are a field blend. Is it all the same soil type? And why do you parcel off 4 as a field blend? How does that affect the final product, the final wine?
So we have, what I discovered when I took over is that in fact we have a mosaic of soil and subsoil. And that's where you get the consistency, because the Merlot on a very hot and dry year, planted on clay in the bottom part, will perform very well. The Cabernet on the top will always perform very well in a humid year. So it's more or less a mosaic of amazing pieces, amazing terroir put together, which help us to be very consistent. And the old vines, since 2000, one of the improvements we did is that we are sorting them out. In the past, my grandfather was harvesting everything at once, and it was already the best of the best. But since 2000, we are first harvesting the early grape varieties and then the late grape varieties. So we mark each vine at the veraison, the change of color, to see in which category they will belong, and we do that every single year to be as precise as possible. And this is really this is the heart of Aubaï every single vintage. So we vinify it separately, of course, but we blend it together in the wine of Aubaï. And next time, I wait for you at Aubaï.
Just two quick questions. First one, what do you think about the en-primeur system right now? Is it, in fact, broken, as everyone in the press have been going on about for the last few years? Can it be improved? And the second question is, do you pay much attention about consumer trends, like who's drinking your wine, where are they in the world, how often, what are their feedback? And where do you get this data from, or you don't really pay much focus on that? Thanks.
So first question, the en-primeur system, everybody will, well, some people, when you have off vintage, started to write, this is broken, this is the end, etc. We are just in the middle of a very good campaign, but I do think the system is changing. In the past, we used to sell 90% of our wines en primeur, and I do sell Aubaï in 15 minutes, which is crazy. It gives me gray hair every year, because to make your turnover of the year in 15 minutes, it's always a bit scary. But I do think you have vintages which should be sold en primeur, and other vintages which should not be sold en primeur. So that's the first point. The second point is that when you have a primeur vintage, I do believe that it's good to keep a little bit of wine to be able to provide restaurants who might not buy en primeur. And if they want to buy 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, if we have nothing left at the estate, then we are in trouble. So the system is evaluating also because of the price of the wine going up. And the whole chain can't finance the primeur as they used to do, but I don't think the primeur system is dead at all, and I do believe it's an amazing moment, because imagine that not a single other wine region in the world catches the attention of all the industry during 1 or 2 months per year. So this is quite unique, and we should preserve it, and we should make people happy to buy en primeur. And I remember, just for you to remember, 2 advantages of buying en primeur. First thing is that usually you make money because you buy cheaper when it will be released in bottle later. And secondly, you can pick up your favorite formats. And I always recommend people to buy at least a case of bottle, a case of Magnum. And if you have children born or that year, or if you get married, buy double Magnum, Jéroboam, Imperial, and you can select your formats buying en primeur. And the second part of your question was, sorry?
About, do you pay much attention to consumer trends?
Yes, that's a good question, because you have 2 kinds of wine. You have the wines who are adapting to the markets and matching the markets, and you have the wines who are, as I mentioned, reference. And we should be over the time, because if we adapt the taste of our wine to certain markets, certain new markets or whatever, we are wrong, as I mentioned earlier. When you're a reference, keep doing what you are doing. I will give you another example. Hermès, you know the brand Hermès? It's very classic, but they make things of their time. It's exactly the same for us. We are classic brands of Bordeaux. We are extremely intemporel, we say in France. But we are making wines of our time with the technology of today. But we make wine not only for now, we make wines for in 10 years' time, 50 years' time. So we have to keep our soul, we have to keep our style. Otherwise, we saw that in Bordeaux, some people follow the fashion and they're out. We don't speak about them anymore. So you should always be a reference. And when you take a bottle of Aubaï, you know what you get. And you should never be disappointed. So you know if that evening you want to have this silkiness, this softness aspect, and this power at the same time, you will take Obai, you will not be disappointed. If I'm going one way and then another way next morning, you will be lost. You see what I mean?
I was just curious about, when you get the 100 point, was that, you have a plan to actually getting 100 points, so you work towards that plan. Is that how you work? Or now that you already have the 100 points, and are you trying to do the same thing? You have an action plan, this is what I need to do in order to get another 100 points.
We didn't work thinking we have to get 100 points. Or we work every year thinking we have to make the best wine we ever made. So that's the way we think. So every year we start from scratch thinking, okay, let's do the best wine ever. And at the end of the year, you just do what God let you do, because it's a very humble, work. We just got frost in Burgundy. Most of the people lost everything because of the frost, and the one who didn't lost everything because of the frost, they just lost it because of the hail. So our job is crazy, and of course, it's a dream of every single winemaker to get 100 points, because it's a supreme recognition. It's an award. As Florence said, it's a golden medal. It's when you're a restaurant, it's a 3-star Michelin. So I considered it as a fantastic reward for all the work we put together, but it has never been our main target. Our target is to do well what we do in order to please every consumer. That's the most important thing.
You mentioned global warming a couple of times. How do you see it affecting what's going on in your business now and maybe in the future? And do you have any sort of plan for trying to tackle it? Thank you.
So, so far, it's been very positive for Bordeaux. If you remember the 50s or the 70s, you could do only 1, 2, eventually 3 good vintages in 10 years. In the last 18 years, I was so lucky because we had amazing weather most of the time. So it affected positively our region so far. What I don't know about is what will happen in 50 years. That I don't know. But I can tell you that the way we vinify and the way we grew vines is already completely different as when I started. So what I did when I arrived, we are getting in another direction today. So we adapt ourselves, and globally speaking, what will we do for the region, for France? I think it's a world discussion, and we are all responsible, of course, to improve. But it's very important that we don't go too far, that's for sure. But so far, it's been a benefit.
What makes Robert Parker so special? Because, I mean, so many people who can taste wine and evaluate and give points and whatever. And why is he the guru, in the world? Everybody talk about him.
Well, because he was the first one to make this system, and because he made it simple and clear. So that was his big. That was a big new thing that he changed. In the past, you had to read about the wine to know how it is. Is it medium body? Is it big? Is it dark? Is it etc. With just a score, he made it simple. So that's easy. I remember somebody in Bordeaux told me, I love to read what Parker write about our wine, but in fact, the only one thing I want is 2 words, 100. So it's easy, You get in the shop and you see what's there, and you see the scores, and you don't have to know if it's a 3rd classified gross from Margaux, or if it's a 2nd classified gross from Pauillac or whatever. So he makes it simple, That was his big advantage, and he's a great man. I'm always very impressed when I see him giving conference, because he has a capacity of analysis which is amazing. And I always love to read his report on the vintage because in one page he got it all. He got it all about the weather and the whole story of the year. He got it all about the markets, about the economic situation around the world, and what should be the premier campaign. Neil Martin is pretty good at that too, actually. But Parker always had this amazing capacity of synthèse, of being very synthetic. And I think that helped a lot the consumer.
The American, as the introduction of California as a global player, and Australia also as a global player. How did you at within Bordeaux react, and how are you competing in those markets or with those markets?
You mean with the rise of California,
Yeah.
Australia? Yes?
Yes.
Well, first of all, let me tell you that I do believe the sun shines for everyone. And the great thing of this increasing competition is that it pushed us all. And in that sense, Parker helped also the properties in Bordeaux to make better quality. And today, you hardly find a bad wine around the world. If I remember 20 or 30 years ago, you could find crap wines very often. Today, it's difficult. And you have cheap wines, which are super well made and with great quality. So that's the first point. The second thing is that if you look at what happened around the world, most of what we call flying winemaker come from Bordeaux and helped other vineyards around the world to improve. So we still have this amazing energy coming from Bordeaux and science, which is spread everywhere. So that's the second point. And the third point is I think that today it could be an advantage for Bordeaux, because when you keep hearing Bordeaux is expensive, but when you look at the top vineyard of California, Italy, Spain, Germany, Bordeaux looks cheap, actually. And very often, you have wines around the world which are much more expensive than Bordeaux. So have a close look, especially on the premier campaign going on. But you have lots of Cru Classés from the Médoc, which are selling for less than 50 euro, which is not even the price of a second wine in California. And I think the competition overall has been very good. I don't know if it answers your question, but it's been positive.
Are there very few female winemakers in Bordeaux? And if that's the case, why?
Today, you have more and more, and we are relatively many today. But when I started, I was one of the first. Even in my family, couldn't be a woman because it was not a job for a woman. So I don't blame my grandfather for that, but I have to say I thank Bob Wilmers because he trusted me to make the job, and he gave me this huge privilege to run Aubailly. But that wasn't obvious 20 years ago. And in the past, you probably know that a woman was not allowed in a cellar. It could make the wine turn into vinegar. So we can't, and that was only in the 70s. It's yesterday. So we did a great way. And I was talking earlier about harmony. I'm against quota. I'm against power for women or whatever. But what happened at Aubailly in a very incredible way, without even I notice, is that we have 50% of men and 50% of women in the fields, in the cellar, in the office. And I did that without even noticing. So I do believe in great harmony. And Gabrielle, that I mentioned earlier, we share lots of things, lots of ideas, and usually has global vision. I have more precise, I'm more precise or detailed oriented, and working together makes a fabulous team. So I wouldn't talk about Aubailly being run by a woman, but being run by a great team.
I was just wondering, with a wine like the 2009, your 2009, do you have a sense of when would be the optimal time to drink it?
That's a very good question, and I'm back to what I said, saying trust your own palate. According to where you come from, to also where you live, you don't have the same kind of wines. For example, if I'm in France, having dinner with friends on a Saturday night, I won't open the same bottle or the same vintage as if I'm with my grandmother on a Sunday lunch. And if I'm in a place where it's very warm, I won't maybe open the same kind of vintage than if it's winter time. I would rather open younger vintages in a hot climate and older, more mature vintages in a very cold winter time. But it depends of your taste. Some countries like America, they already almost drank the 2009. And in England, they will wait another 20 years. So, that's why it's also, and when this gentleman was talking about matching the market, if there's one thing we may do, is that we may try to make wine as perfect as possible in order that we can enjoy them when they're young, but in order also that they keep this amazing ability of aging, which is the hallmark of Bordeaux. That's why when you buy a Bordeaux, you never waste your money, because you know that they will only improve with age, and if ever you, for whatever reason, you can't drink them, you can always sell them back, and they're worth much more. So this aging capacity is really something which you should never forget, because it's one of the main characteristics of Bordeaux.
But still, if I can just complete, because I would be a bit frustrated with your answer, I think 2009 is a massive, for what I've heard, and I've been lucky to taste it, is a massive vintage, and it does require at least, 5-10 years of wait?
Of course, yes.
Well, of course, it's not obvious, I guess. If you have it in your cellar, you're tempted. So you should wait at least how many years?
Well, it's a wine, when you taste it, since it's a baby, you get it, and you have this creaminess aspect, which makes it so sexy, and that's why the whole world loved it, because it's like a beautiful woman. Is what you see, is what you get. It's there. But of course, if you can wait, it can only get better with years. So I remember another chateau owner in the Médoc, a famous one. He said, "This is the one. You have different kind of wines. You have the wines you just spend a night with. You have the wines you like to spend a weekend with, and you have the ones you'll get married with. So that's probably a wine which will keep its word. You should get married with, and keep it in your cellar, keep it to share with your family later on. It's a wine which will age fantastically well, and you know what means aging fantastically well. It means looking in a few years, it's a wine which will look reasonably younger than its age, because if you look much younger than your age, then but reasonably younger, and which will be much more interesting than a few years before. So that is
wonderful words to finish, I guess. So thank you very much, Veronique.